And it is my great pleasure to have the honor of introducing our lunchtime keynote speaker here that, if you've been here for the whole conference, has been referenced several times from this podium already. But in case you haven't heard the news, any opinion I give is mine and not that of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. And my mother, my wife, and my daughters would like to reserve the right to distance themselves from my opinions as well. So it is not often that I have had the opportunity to introduce an audience to a person for whom I have a very direct affinity. So Juan and I did not grow up together, but we have lived very similar lives. So I am the youngest of 4 children. My parents were both teachers. My father was a faculty member at a community college called Triton College in River Grove, Illinois. Among the children in my family, we have 1 PhD, 5 master's degrees, 4 bachelor's degrees, and those journeys, our middle class journeys, started with three associate's degrees. So for us, our livelihoods, my father's livelihood was community college, and the beginning of our path was community college. And so there is that very direct sort of connection. The other thing is, Juan and I both graduated from the University of Illinois' urban planning program. We each got our master's degrees there. And Juan, correct me if I'm wrong, but in that curriculum, there was nothing about how to run a nonprofit, which you and I have both done. There was nothing in there about how to run a community college system. And there was certainly nothing in that curriculum about working at a central bank. And the reason I bring that up is because while what I'm doing now did not need to be predicted by what I did in school, the education itself has served me well. And I think, Juan, you would probably say the same thing. I didn't need to know 30 years ago that I was going to end up here to benefit from the education. And the education itself is the pathway to where I am now. So there's that. And then finally, Juan, you also started your journey here at a community college as well. So we've had the opportunity to work with Juan in several capacities over the past decade or more. Before running the city colleges of Chicago, Juan was the executive director of the Instituto del Progreso Latino in Chicago, which is the nonprofit that he was running in Chicago. And about 10 years ago, we were working on an initiative, and several of the other Federal Reserve banks that are in the room here were a part of this, where we were trying to figure out how to connect very local, place-based community development to regional economies. And one of the things that we focused in on was, for a lot of these local place-based community developers, they were trying to figure out how to get residents in their communities employed. And at the time, an Institute for Comprehensive Community Development was created, and Valerie Jarrett actually specifically challenged a group to say, look, if you're helping local nonprofits do that community development and you're not connecting it to regional development, all of those efforts are really going to run into a very strong headwind. So the challenge was to help very local place-based developers connect to regional economies. And when we hosted that conversation on connecting place-based employment to regional labor markets, Juan was one of the people that we were able to call upon as for his expertise in doing that, from education for high schoolers through adult education as well. So we've had this great interaction, and then Juan was named Chancellor of the city colleges and has been doing some very creative things that we think you will all benefit from hearing about. And so it's my great pleasure to welcome Juan to the podium to help us bring this home.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? I'm doing wonderful. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. But because I'm in education, I also know that this is the closing, right, after a few days of meetings. So it's sort of like giving a commencement speech, right, as graduates want to get their degrees and head home with their families. So believe me, I will be cognizant of that, okay, as I give my remarks. But the middle class is a topic I know much about. First of all, I grew up in the middle class. During most of my adult life, I've remained in the middle class. My mother gave birth to 6 children and chose to stay home and raise us. That was a choice my parents could afford. The home I came to as a newborn child is the same home I left for college. My family lived in hope, not fear. My father had a steady income, health benefits for the entire family, a pension that would ensure a quality of life as my parents aged, and the security that he and my mother would not be reliant on their children. Don't get me wrong, my parents' desire for independence in their golden years had nothing to do with a lack of confidence in their children. At least that's what they made us believe. Until my dad at graduation said, "Son, you're the last one I thought would graduate from college, but congratulations." It had to do with their sense of responsibility and their desire to age with dignity. My parents believed that with the benefits of education, my 4 sisters, my brother, and I would have a better life than they did. They insisted their children succeed in education. My father was a Korean War veteran with a 6th grade education. We like to call him a tough guy, only on the outside. When report cards came, my parents would line us up one by one, oldest and youngest, and we had to be accountable for the grades that we got in front of both of my parents. They were right. Education paid off. My siblings and I, doing very different things, have the same peace of mind my parents enjoyed as they raised us. We are passing on that middle-class existence to our children. Those of us who have lived the middle-class life know how precious an asset it is to our families, communities, and society. Being middle class defines America and drives America. The middle class brings stability to families and communities. Our story is no different than many who have lived a middle-class life. My mother volunteered at our church. My father created an organization called Latin Americans for America. Mr. Campos coached the baseball team. Mr. Darcy coached the football team. The fabric of community life was driven by the existence of the middle class. The promise of the middle class is so much more than an income. When entering the middle class is a seemingly reachable goal, it brings hope to the working poor. A hope that the hardships, biases, injustices, and daily sacrifices working poor members of society must endure will be worth it. The promise of the middle class, in that way, stabilizes all communities. But when that hope dissipates, we enter a very dangerous zone as society. Drug addiction, violence, low labor force participation, high local unemployment rates, great disparities in life expectancy between the residents on the west side of Chicago and those just a few miles away in middle class and wealthy communities across our city. The mindsets that drive our daily decisions as a society must change. The danger we face goes way beyond a shrinking middle class. And while my own personal experiences is solidly middle class, I've spent my adult working life in communities where people are persistently pursuing opportunity to join the middle class. Places where hope still exists in abundance, but the pressure put on poor people and their communities are causing people to break. Over 25 years in the lowest income communities in my city, I have come to know that the working poor have a fountain of hope, tenacity, and drive unmatched in America. By and large, they never give up on their quest. When the job gets tougher, they toughen up. When the hours get longer, they work them. When the pay gets worse, they find a second job. When the eviction notice comes, they gather the strength to pack up, move out, and move on. When the opportunity to grow and advance opens up, they make sacrifices to enter into occupational programs. For 16 years, I led a community-based education institution where adult education students would come in after a long, hard day's work. You know, I'd be in the bathroom and they'd be throwing water on their face to refreshen themselves as they headed into class after a 10-hour workday to be able to grow their skills. And you see this time and time again. Today, I lead an institution, City Colleges of Chicago, that has 80,000 students who, by and large, don't have a middle-class life, have never known a middle-class life, but can see that possibility all around them and are in persistent pursuit of it. So, in preparation for these remarks, we interviewed a handful of our youngest City Colleges students and graduates, students hopeful that they will make it into the middle class. Listen to their thoughts as it relates to the middle class. Feel the hopes and possibilities that emanate from their voices. Know that behind them are parents who are struggling every day to make it in our city.
When I think of the term middle class, I think of a comfortable lifestyle, being able to support your family, and having all the things you need to have a successful life.
For middle class, to me, I think it's the classic American dream, where it doesn't really necessarily have to be you're rich, but it means that you have an opportunity. So when I picture it, I imagine a white picket fence, a house with a driveway, the comfort in order to be able to afford that kind of lifestyle.
When I think of middle class or the middle class lifestyle, I think of making ends meet to pay the bills, not being able to pay for everything you want, but making a priority for things you need to pay.
The classic American dream of being able to own a house, or being able to own a car, and have a family. A lot of that has to do with stability, and I think you can't have that dream unless you have a sense of stability, and that comes from making it in the middle class.
The middle class is definitely shrinking. Wealth inequality of wealth in this country is definitely on the rise. You have more people getting very rich and more people getting very poor.
I think disappearing middle class has to do a lot with the wages and the mindset. A lot of people feel that they need to be rich or they have to go above and beyond. They don't feel like they could live within their means with the resources they have.
More and more in the United States, we're seeing the middle class is also being characterized by certain issues medical expenses are becoming very, very difficult to afford for a lot of people within the middle class. And there's certainly a lot of other issues for instance, I'd say affording college tuition and things like that. These are all becoming hot button issues.
I decided to make an investment in my education because I have 3 younger siblings, so we're a total family of 6. And for me, being able to be the first one in my family to go to college is really important to me, and I don't want to be that financial burden on my family.
Education is important in the sense of learning, but it's also important just to get your foot into the door.
I really want to give back to the community. It's not so much of me looking at it from a financial standpoint, but it's more of what I could do for others.
It's half the battle to provide opportunities, but then it's the other half to educate people on the fact that those opportunities exist?
Eventually, college should be free, or at least for 2 years, as it's been doing, because it really helps in the long run trajectory.
Not everybody is okay with just having a job, minimum wage. There should be pathway programs to doctors or making careers that aren't easily accessible to my community.
I think that free public education, even exploring that option of making community college and 2-year colleges free around the country, that's certainly something that needs to be looked into, because that made such a significant difference in my life and for the lives of a lot of my friends. It's definitely a way for a lot of lower income people to break into the middle class and sort of advance their not only financial status in the future, but sort of advance their family's financial status.
Thank you. Behind every one of our students is an amazing story, and if you listen clearly to what they said about the middle class, they're not talking about dollars. They're talking about mindset. They're talking about worry. They're thinking about it as a state of being, a state of being that's felt. And that's what I want to build on with you all today. We all know we're here at this conference because we know we've allowed wages in many sectors to stagnate and inequality to grow, and the rising cost of college to saddle future generations with mountains of debt. We've given people more and more things to worry about, not less. We've increased unproductive, toxic stress in society. We see this all around us. We must re-examine our values and reinvest where it matters to renew the promise of the middle class. Our thinking as a people has to evolve and advance. My father was a steelworker. I grew up in the middle class because of labor unions. My parents are living a quality of life today in their 80s because working conditions improved. Traditional labor unions may not be coming back. Even so, we have an opportunity to evolve, be smarter. Think of all the jobs that we could make middle-class occupations if we simply decided to pay people better. Workers caring for our children during the precious first 3 years of any human life and the challenging last years of any human life. How smart is it to have those workers be among the lowest wage workers in society? What does that say about us as a people when we assign such a low monetary value to these workers? Our mindsets have to change. Our children are our most valued asset. Why not reward the workers who care for them with the opportunity to join the middle class? Why not ensure the most prepared early childhood workforce this nation has ever seen? Why not take advantage of the known benefits that come from learning in the first 3 years of life by investing in talented, mission-driven people who care for our nation's children? My City College's students, most of whom are low-wage workers themselves, are doing exactly what we tell them they need to do to succeed. They still believe in us. They still believe in the promise of a middle class. They still believe in America and what education can do for you in America. That is the beauty of community colleges. Our students are optimistic. They chose a manageable path without all the debt, a clear path to a career and upward mobility. Students know, they know that education pays off. You know, A bachelor's degree is worth $2.8 million on average over a lifetime. Those with an associate's degree earn nearly 1/3 more than those with just a high school diploma. And this statistic, which is very important, about 28% of workers with associate's degrees earn more than the median earnings of workers with bachelor's degrees. There are thousands of jobs out there for a middle-class family that don't require a bachelor's degree. Our students also know college can leave you saddled with debt, especially if your degree is not relevant to employer demands. College debt and a lack of program relevance are dual threats to our students' hope to enter the middle class, and shouldn't be this way. We have to question our values as a country, as when people are working so doggone hard and can't get ahead. We have to question how we're allocating resources and holding our educational systems accountable. I can tell you in Chicago, we're doing all we can to invest in our students. I'm here to tell you a little bit more about that. At city colleges, we have prioritized keeping college affordable, ensuring our programs are relevant to employers and universities, and supporting our students along a pathway to upward mobility. Our students want the same things as the college students before them. They want economic stability, as Sam said. They want the ability to give back to their communities, as Chloe said. But our students face challenges that we need to be prepared for. Many of our students are the first in their family to attend college. 75% of our 80,000 students are either Latino or African American. Many of our students feel the pressure of juggling family, work, and school responsibilities at the same time. In fact, half of our valedictorians and salutatorians in this year's 2019 class were parents themselves. Our students who responded to the recent Real College survey that documents student needs, what do we find? 44% were food insecure in the prior 30 days. 54% were housing insecure in the previous year. And 15% were homeless in the previous year. I see these students all the time. They carry their clothes in their backpacks, along with their books. But when given an opportunity and the proper supports, our students can thrive. Half of our graduates transfer within 2 years of completion. And the annual number of associate degree graduates has doubled at our institution in the last decade. Our recipe for success has been access, relevance, and student support. We've worked to ensure access to an affordable education. We've worked to ensure our programs are relevant to the demands of employers and universities. And we've worked to provide our students with the supports they need. Let me tell you about access first. The key is to open the door wide. Our tuition is just $1,752 per semester for 12 credit hours. Anything beyond 12 credit hours, you don't pay a dime. No extra fees for labs, for registration, for anything else. That is our price. We've held that tuition cost flat for the last 4 years, even as our state has historic disinvestments in higher education. We give students transportation passes for our full-time students, and this year started to give them to our part-time students. And recognizing that the cost of community college can be daunting for some students, Chicago's Mayor Rahm Emanuel launched the STAR Scholarship. Some might call it free college. You heard our students talk about free college. Our mayor calls it free college. But what it really is earned college. And that, to me, is an important distinction. Students qualify for the scholarship with a B average and testing nearly college ready while they're in high school. We're able to motivate students while they are in high school to complete and finish strong. This is a promise program because it offers students the promise that if they work hard in high school, the hard work will pay off. Students who qualify attend city colleges for free for up to 3 years and get tuition and books paid for. And the scholarship is open to public high school students, public charter high school students, undocumented students, Catholic school students. More than 6,400 students have become Chicago Star Scholars since 2015. More than 80% of these Star Scholars are Latino and African American, 63% female. Star Scholars have a fall-to-fall retention rate of 86%. Almost 50% of full-time, first-time Star Scholars from our inaugural class have completed. That's over double the national average. And the scholarship doesn't stop at an associate's degree. We have 26 STAR transfer partners who are discounting their tuition anywhere between $1,000 and $50,000 to help with the next road should that student look at going on to a four-year university. So through Chicago Star, we've created a debt-free education. And through our tuition pricing, we've created a very low-cost education. And because of that, we are building a path to the middle class. We're also working with the K-12 system in dual credit, dual enrollment programs. That's increased tenfold. In fact, last 2 years, we had 500 students that completed a full semester's worth of coursework before they graduated from high school. That's money and time saved for those students. But access isn't enough. Relevance really does matter. The degrees that we produce must be relevant to the marketplace. That's why we created centers of excellence in our colleges, tied to high-demand industry areas in our marketplace. That's why we're working with employers to examine our curriculum and to develop new modern facilities. We've invested over $560 million in latest technology facilities that will help our students to grow. We're listening to employers and four-year universities and modifying our programs and curriculum accordingly. But even that's not enough, because our students often don't have access to workplaces once they graduate. They don't have the networks that allow them to become more upwardly mobile earlier on in their careers. And so we set a goal last year that half of our graduates will have a work-based learning experience as associate degree earners before they complete their studies or immediately after their graduation. We're at 10% now, mostly in healthcare and traditional clinical-oriented type learning opportunities. But we are accelerating fast because work-based learning is critical for our students, as it actually gets them in a job that is aligned to their future career. They're in jobs already that often take away from their studies versus enhance those opportunities. And it builds those professional connections to companies who had never hired from city colleges before. Aon Corporation is 2 blocks away from Harrow, Washington, and had never hired a city college student. Today, we proudly state that we have over 70 apprentices at the Aon Corporation, changing the face of that corporation and the face of opportunity in our city. This strong network of employers is growing. This year, Accenture's Midwest office will hire more entry-level talent from city colleges of Chicago than from any other single institution of higher education, period. When just 3 years ago, they hired none. We're changing the way labor markets work for local communities as well. And employers are partnering with us. They see the talent in our students. They see the opportunity for their workplaces. But the systems around us, despite all of our efforts and success, are not set up to assist us. There's no real scalable system for ensuring that adults wanting to return for skills and education have a path. Pell Grants are limited, WIOA is limited, the funding mechanisms are just not set up for what we want to accomplish. When I was running a not-for-profit, I thought this was a problem of the not-for-profit world. Now I'm running one of the largest community college systems in America, and the same lack of systems apply. I've got employers looking to build aeronautic, engineering, maintenance, technician programming, but I don't have the funding mechanism to scale that fast enough and quick enough. And so we must create financial aid and related systems that incentivize lifetime learning so that people can continuously adapt to the rapidly changing economy. And FourYear Universities, well, they're starting to recognize our value and partner with community colleges in new, creative ways. We know there are less foreign students. In our state, there are more students leaving our state. And while our four-year public universities in Illinois boast having 122,000 students, some from Illinois and some from the United States of America, community colleges in Illinois boast having 519,000 students, all from Illinois, most from the hardest hit places in rural and urban America. And so our efforts with four-year universities have been extensive. We're inviting them to be on our campuses. We're heading over to their campuses. We're finding ways to reduce the cost of education for our students. But we've got to go deeper in helping our students because of the issues I talked about earlier. And so we're partnering. We're partnering with everyone you can imagine. We're partnering with our regional food bank to open food pantries in every one of our colleges. We're partnering with a non-for-profit to create an emergency fund so when a student is impacted by a life situation, they don't have to leave school to attend to that life situation. We've opened up wellness centers at every college to deal with social, emotional needs of our students. We've opened up veteran centers, disability access centers, tutors, advising, writing and math centers. We are responding to the great needs that our students have. That's what this takes. And we're committed to doing everything we can to ensure our students meet their goals. But the reality of what we're actually doing, the reality that community colleges are for many the path to the middle class, really warrants far greater attention and support. Harvard professor Raj Chetty has looked at the impact of U.S. colleges and universities on students' income growth. He and his fellow researchers found that the community college system that I lead moved 27% of students up to income quintiles. That may not seem a lot to you, but 27% of people moving on seems a good start on a journey that we are going to improve. We rank in the top 10% of two-year colleges on mobility. The best community college on mobility, Laredo Community College in Texas, moves 41% of its students up 2 or more quintiles in income. We like to talk about graduation rates. We like to change the conversation to mobility rates. So the promise of moving from the bottom to the top of the income ladder is in fact what makes our country great. Community colleges hold the nation's assets, its lowest income students with the highest growth potential. Every student won't break through to the top, but the stories of those who do, those stories are what drives America's belief in itself. We invest in our pathways to greatness. We invest in the greatness of our nation. As a Century Foundation Senior Fellow Richard Collenberg has said, the success or failure of the 9 million students who attend America's community colleges will help determine whether America's promise of social mobility will be kept. Community colleges serve 41% of all U.S. undergraduates, and those are students often with the least exposure to college and with the greatest needs. We're a gateway to college for millions. And yet, the lack of parity in our treatment compared to four-year college peers is stark. You have all heard about the college admissions scandal in the news, where rich and famous parents were paying money and cheating their children's way into four-year colleges across the country. But as the New York Times also highlighted, the real college scandal is the underfunding of America's community colleges. The Century Foundation finds that on average, public research universities spend $40,000 compared to $14,000 spent by community colleges. Remove the research from this mix, public research universities spend 60% more than community colleges. This has everything to do with the will of our country to invest in its people and especially its poorest. It has everything to do with our priorities and our values. If we invest in community colleges, we can create economic mobility. If we invest in community colleges, we create a more inclusive economy. And if we invest in community colleges, we deliver on the promise of the middle class. We deliver on the promise for Vicky, for Sam, for Zubar, and for Chloe, and millions more like them. Let me tell you that they are on their way. Vicky left City Colleges debt-free and is now studying for her bachelor's degree in journalism at Dominican, a four-year university in Chicago. Zubar left City Colleges debt-free and is now studying economics and computer science at a highly ranked Northwestern University. Chloe is a star scholar working on her nursing prerequisites and preparing to transfer to FourYear University. And Sam was part of a WorkBased Learning experience at Northern Trust Bank. Sam graduated from City Colleges with his associate's degree and a job at Northern Trust Bank. At just 21, Sam is already a senior operations analyst at the bank and is taking classes toward his bachelor's degree. He has no debt. He'll own a home soon enough. He'll be contributing to his community in ways we can't imagine. Sam, Zubar, Vicky, and Chloe, they made a smart decision to attend community college. It's a decision that I and the 6 members of my family made over 30 years ago. It's a decision we should be encouraging more and more students to make. There are places where we should truly see more and more investment to meet the growing demands of our students and our society. If we as a country really live the values we claim to have, if we really want a society where people can go from the bottom to the top, let's invest where it matters. Let's value work that matters. And let's create systems that support those people working to climb the ladder and the institutions that help them to get there. Only then will we renew the promise of a middle class. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. I was asked if I would take questions, so I'm happy to take questions if there's any time for that. If not,
Hi, Joseph Ershine from the Federal Reserve Board. Can you talk a little bit about the conversation you had with those employers that we were able to penetrate, and like the one that was a couple blocks away, or the Accenture, and what their thinking is, and what it would take to get other employers to think like them?
Yeah, that's great. So we had engaged both Aon and Accenture, and they've been really great leaders in this regard. In the review of our curriculum years ago, asked them to make sure that what we were doing was relevant to their needs as business and industry. And that was very helpful. They gained confidence in what we were doing. But that didn't mean they were hiring our students, okay? That took an extra effort from them. Quite frankly, their leadership realized that there was a value proposition for their company in proximity. In having proximity to our students, they began to see that they were missing out on a talent base and that they wanted to figure out how to tap that talent base. And so they challenged their company to find places where bachelor's degree earners were actually costing them money, high turnover. Places where the requirements, what Aon will tell you is no HR person gets fired for hiring a person with a BA, right? But that doesn't mean that's the most efficient way to operate. And so they were able to find several areas in their company where apprentices could actually take on responsibilities and perform those very, very well. And so they created an apprentice program. Similarly, Accenture was able to find some places in their support units to their client-facing work and bring in initially 4 people. But they had such great experience with the 4 that they grew from 4 to 12 to 27. We're likely going up to 45 in the coming year. Our students have gone beyond the back support functions to now being part of client-facing teams. Our students, in fact, are part of the marketing efforts they have to some of their clients from both a diversity and inclusion standpoint as well. And so they found business value in our students. And so we don't believe this is just a market force because of the strength of the economy. We believe this is a real change in how companies are thinking about their workplaces. In fact, those employers sat me down when I came in and committed to creating something called the Chicagoland Apprenticeship Network, a new network of employers that they are leading with the stated goal of reaching 1,000 apprentices in the next couple years. These are from nothing. These are from companies that don't have these kinds of established programs with our system to companies that have newly established it. And when we get there, you can imagine, somewhere between 50 and 100 companies that have never hired from our system before, having a direct pipeline to the talent that comes from every part of Chicago, right? And so it starts to change the mindset and the belief. If you're a little kid in the south side of Chicago, you look up to downtown and you say, that's really not for me, it's actually sort of true. Because if every company hires from just the Big Ten schools in the area, right, and the pathway to the Big Ten school for those kids is pretty hard, they're not likely to get in those companies. And so that's rational thought to say that downtown is not for me. And we're changing that mindset, and that makes a difference in local communities, and I would say it makes a difference for our city. Okay. Good? Thank you.